You sit down to work with full intention. Coffee next to you. Laptop open. A clear task in front of you. You type 3 sentences, then your hand moves without thinking. You click your email. Nothing urgent. You close it. 2 minutes later, you check Slack. Then your phone. Then the news. Then back to the document. The morning passes, and somehow you were busy the entire time. You don't like admitting that you're not distracted by emergencies, you're distracted by the habit of checking. Here's the interruption you can use today, exactly as written: I will not check anything until 10:30. Say it out loud. Then close every inbox and turn your phone face down. Set a visible timer for 25 minutes and begin the task in front of you. In the next 10 minutes, something shifts. The urge to check still flickers, but it weakens. Your breathing steadies. Your attention deepens slightly. You notice that nothing catastrophic happens when you don't look. The world keeps moving. And for the first time this morning, you stay with one thing. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. This won't make you hyperproductive overnight, but it will stop your brain from constantly scanning. The real problem isn't that you check. It's that checking has become a reflex loop. You open email not because you need information, but because your brain craves novelty. You refresh feeds not because something changed, but because you're uncomfortable with the friction of focused effort. This is costing you more than lost minutes. It fractures your thinking. It prevents deep work. It keeps your nervous system slightly alert, slightly restless, and slightly unfinished. And the cost compounds. By 3 p.m., you're mentally tired, not from output, but from switching. You tell yourself you're staying on top of things. But what you're really doing is staying on the surface of everything. The Stoics spoke about governing attention, about directing the mind instead of being pulled by impressions. Today, the impressions aren't just thoughts. They're notifications, unread badges, red dots, and refresh buttons. You don't need to become unreachable. You need containment. By the end of this lesson, you'll build structured check windows that protect your concentration without creating anxiety. You'll understand how to separate true urgency from mental restlessness. And you'll feel calmer because your brain stops scanning for updates every few minutes. If you've ever ended a workday feeling exhausted but unsure what you actually completed, this lesson is for you. Subscribe if you want practical systems that protect focus in a world designed to fracture it. First, you'll see how constant checking rewires your brain into anticipation mode. Next, you'll install specific check windows that retrain that impulse. Then, you'll learn how to handle the discomfort that rises when you don't look. Finally, you'll walk through a real afternoon where the urge to check almost wins, but doesn't. Later, there's a moment where you hear a notification while deep in thought. That moment will test whether you're in control or just reacting. You're 18 minutes into a report. The idea is finally flowing. You're connecting points clearly. Then you feel it, that subtle internal nudge. Not a sound. Not a buzz. Just a thought: I should check email real quick. It feels harmless. Responsible, even. You click. Nothing important. But when you return to the report, the thread is thinner. You reread your last paragraph trying to rebuild momentum. Here's the microscript you'll use from now on: checking is scheduled, not emotional. Say it quietly when the urge hits. This works because the impulse to check is rarely logical. It's emotional. It's relief-seeking. When the work becomes slightly uncomfortable, cognitively demanding, uncertain, effortful, your brain looks for easier stimulation. Checking inboxes provides quick novelty and low-stakes reward. It feels productive, but it's actually avoidance disguised as responsibility. By saying, checking is scheduled, not emotional, you create a separation. You name the impulse as a feeling, not a command. And when something becomes observable instead of automatic, you regain leverage. In North American work culture, responsiveness is praised. Quick replies signal engagement. Slack activity looks like productivity. Email zero feels like control. But this environment quietly trains your nervous system to scan constantly. Even without notifications, you anticipate them. Picture this: you're working from home in Chicago or Toronto. It's mid-morning. You've committed to not checking until 11 a.m. At 10:17, your mind drifts. What if a client replied? What if your manager needs something? The friction increases. You feel slightly exposed, like you're missing something important. That's the real addiction. Not the content. The anticipation. The Stoics warned about being ruled by impressions, that first mental tug that demands immediate reaction. Today, impressions arrive through red badges and pop-up banners. The principle hasn't changed. The delivery system has. Your tiny action today is this: choose 2 check windows for the entire morning. For example, 11 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. Write them down physically. Until those times, inboxes remain closed. Not minimized. Closed. This is measurable. If you check outside those windows, you reset the timer. Now notice what happens internally. In the first 10 minutes of not checking, your brain searches for something else to grab. It suggests opening a new tab. Refreshing analytics. Scanning headlines. You feel slightly restless. Instead of resisting aggressively, practice this slow moment. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 6. While exhaling, remind yourself, the window is coming. You are not denying access forever. You are delaying intentionally. That distinction reduces anxiety. When 11 o'clock arrives and you open your inbox, something interesting happens. Most messages aren't urgent. The imagined emergencies rarely exist. And because you weren't checking every 5 minutes, you process them faster and with clearer judgment. Here's why this matters later. If you don't master this early layer, scheduled checking, you'll struggle in high-pressure moments. Because when stress rises, your brain defaults to scanning behavior. It seeks certainty through updates. And that habit can destroy deep thinking when you need it most. Right now, the goal isn't perfection. It's containment. 2 windows. Closed inbox. Microscript when the urge appears. You're not removing responsiveness. You're relocating it. And when checking becomes scheduled instead of emotional, your brain slowly relearns how to stay. You're in the middle of building a presentation. It's not easy work. You're refining slides, clarifying your argument, tightening language. You hit a sentence that doesn't sound right. Instead of sitting with it, you instinctively open a new tab. Then another. Then you check your team chat. 5 minutes later, you're scrolling headlines you don't even care about. The mistake isn't checking itself. The mistake is believing that checking helps you think. When the task becomes cognitively demanding, your brain looks for relief. And checking feels like relief because it gives you a quick sense of progress. You clear one email. You respond to a message. You refresh something. Small wins. Micro closures. But you abandon the larger, more meaningful effort. So here's the correction: separate friction from emergency. Use this rule: discomfort means stay. When you feel that internal urge to switch tabs because something feels hard, that's your cue to remain. Not because you're forcing discipline through willpower, but because you're recognizing the signal accurately. Difficulty isn't dangerous. It's deep. This works because most checking behavior isn't triggered by external urgency. It's triggered by internal discomfort. When your brain senses ambiguity, uncertainty, or mental strain, it interprets it as something to escape. Checking provides a quick dopamine shift. The problem is that every time you escape friction, you weaken your tolerance for depth. Imagine you're working in a busy office in New York or Vancouver. You've blocked off an hour to work on something important. 20 minutes in, you feel stuck. Your instinct says, maybe I should just clear a few emails while I think. That feels responsible. But in reality, you're fragmenting your attention at the exact moment it needs continuity. Instead, pause. Keep your hands on the keyboard. Take one slow breath. Then ask yourself one question: is this urgent or is this uncomfortable? That question alone interrupts the loop. Most of the time, the honest answer is uncomfortable. Now take a tiny action. Don't solve the whole project. Just write the next imperfect sentence. Draft the next rough bullet point. Adjust one slide. You're not chasing brilliance. You're protecting continuity. Here's the pattern interrupt. Close your eyes for 5 seconds and notice how your body feels when you resist checking. There's tension. Maybe slight agitation. That sensation is what you've been escaping. And it's not dangerous. It's just an effort. By staying through that effort, you retrain your nervous system. You teach it that friction is survivable. Over time, the intensity of the urge decreases because it no longer produces a reward. Now here's why this matters later. When deadlines tighten, when stakes rise, when you're presenting to a client or preparing a critical report, your ability to tolerate cognitive friction determines performance. If you're conditioned to escape discomfort with constant checking, you won't be able to stay with complex thinking under pressure. But if you practice staying when it's mildly uncomfortable, in ordinary mornings, on regular tasks, you build resilience for high-stakes moments. This isn't about never checking. It's about distinguishing between urgency and avoidance. When you catch yourself reaching for a tab during difficulty, remember, discomfort means stay. One breath. One small next step. No dramatic overhaul. And gradually, your mind stops interpreting effort as something to flee. There's a common belief that if you don't constantly check, you'll fall behind. That belief sounds responsible. It sounds proactive. But most of the time, it's a myth. The myth is this: if I'm not checking, I'm missing something important. Here's the truth: if something is truly urgent, it will escalate beyond a silent inbox refresh. Real emergencies don't depend on you refreshing your email every 7 minutes. They escalate through calls, follow-ups, and direct requests. The constant checking isn't protecting you from a crisis. It's protecting you from uncertainty. The stakes are higher than you think. Because when you operate in constant check mode, your brain never fully powers down its alert system. It stays in low-level vigilance. That vigilance fragments attention and drains energy. You finish days mentally tired, not from deep work, but from scanning. So here's the clear instruction: design visibility without constant access. That means you decide when you are reachable, instead of letting every ping decide for you. Use this script when someone questions your response rhythm. I check messages at 11 and 3 so I can stay focused between. Notice what that does. It's calm. It's clear. It's not defensive. You're not apologizing. You're setting structure. This works because expectations adjust to patterns. If you reply instantly 90% of the time and delay randomly 10% of the time, people feel inconsistency. But if you consistently respond within predictable windows, people recalibrate. Now picture a real scenario. You're working remotely from Dallas or Montreal. It's 9:45 a.m. You've committed not to check until 11 o'clock. At 10:02, a Slack notification pops up in the corner of your screen before you remember to silence it. Your body reacts immediately. A small spike of alertness. Curiosity. Concern. The old version of you clicks instantly. The new version pauses. Slow practice moment. Keep your hand still for 5 seconds. Feel the urge in your chest or shoulders. Notice the impulse to click. Then close the notification preview without opening the message. Tell yourself, if it's urgent, they'll follow up. Then return to your task. You may feel uneasy for a minute. That's normal. Your brain expects novelty. It expects reassurance. But after a few minutes, the sensation fades. Your thinking deepens again. This is what durability looks like. Not perfection. Not zero temptation. But choosing structure under pressure. The myth says availability equals professionalism. But constant availability often signals lack of boundaries. Professionals manage attention. They don't surrender it. There's another hidden fear underneath checking, the fear of being perceived as unresponsive. But responsiveness and reactivity are not the same thing. Reactive people answer instantly because they feel compelled. Responsive people answer deliberately because they choose to. When you adopt check windows and stick to them, even when notifications appear, you send a quiet message, to others and to yourself, that your focus has value. This is where most people relapse. Not in calm moments. In triggered ones. When they see 2 follow-up messages. When someone types, in chat. When a colleague says, "Hey, did you see my email?" That's when your boundary is tested. Instead of collapsing into immediate reaction, use this line calmly. "I'll review it during my next check window." No explanation. No apology spiral. Now here's the important part. You don't promise instant review afterward. You follow through at the scheduled time. Consistency builds trust. We're not solving this with willpower. We're building a predictable system. Later, you'll see what happens during a full afternoon where notifications stack up and the pressure subtly increases. That's where your structure either holds or dissolves. It's 1:12 p.m. You just finished lunch and sat back down at your desk. You have a clear plan for the afternoon, 90 minutes on a proposal that actually matters. You close your email. You silence Slack. You put your phone face down. 7 minutes in, you're building momentum. Then your screen lights up. A Slack notification slips through before Do Not Disturb fully activates. You see the preview, "Hey, quick question about the budget numbers." Your chest tightens slightly. You tell yourself it will only take 30 seconds. Your hand moves toward the trackpad. This is the moment. Old habit almost wins. You pause. You remember the structure you built earlier. Checking is scheduled, not emotional. Discomfort means stay. If it's urgent, it will escalate. You don't click. Instead, you take one slow breath. Inhale 4 seconds. Hold. Exhale longer than you inhale. You notice the internal story forming. What if they're waiting? What if this delays the team? What if I look unresponsive? You counter with a quieter thought. My next window is at 3 o'clock. That is soon enough. You turn your attention back to the proposal. The first few seconds feel forced. You reread your last paragraph. The thread feels thinner than it did before the notification. But you stay. 2 minutes later, another Slack ping. Your pulse rises again. The old voice says, "See? They need you." You hover your mouse over the Slack icon, but you don't click. Instead, you right-click and mute notifications for 2 hours. That small physical action reinforces the boundary. You keep writing. The discomfort peaks around minute 4. Your brain is scanning for novelty, for reassurance, for closure. But you give it none. You stay with the numbers, with the argument, with the structure of your proposal. Gradually, the urge softens. At 2:03 p.m., you hit a groove. The sentences come easier. You connect ideas cleanly. The document improves in ways it wouldn't have if you'd fractured your focus. At 2:41 p.m., you finish a full draft section. That never used to happen in one stretch. Now it's 3 p.m. Your scheduled check window arrives. You open Slack deliberately. You see the 2 earlier messages. They weren't emergencies. The first was a clarification. The second was a follow-up because you hadn't answered yet. You reply calmly and concisely. No damage done. No crisis created. And here's what you notice. Because you weren't switching all afternoon, you answer more clearly. Your tone is steady. Your thinking is organized. The world did not collapse in the 90 minutes you were unreachable. Now imagine the alternative version of this afternoon. You click at 1:12. You respond. You return to your proposal but feel scattered. At 1:24, you check email just in case. At 1:37, you refresh analytics. By 2:15, you've touched 6 different platforms. By 3 o'clock, you're mentally tired, and your proposal is still unfinished. That's the quiet cost of checking. Today, the old reaction almost won. You felt the pull. You hovered over the icon. You experienced real tension. But you stayed. You didn't eliminate the urge. You outlasted it. And the improvement isn't dramatic. You're not suddenly a monk with perfect concentration. You still feel the flicker of curiosity when notifications appear. But something is calmer, clearer, more intentional. You prove to yourself that structure holds under mild pressure. Tomorrow I will test it again. But now you've seen what's possible when you stop checking reflexively and start responding deliberately. When you constantly check, you react. When you choose when to check, you respond. One is scattered and externally driven. The other is intentional and internally governed. The difference isn't about productivity hacks. It's about control of attention. When attention belongs to every notification, your day fragments. When attention belongs to you, your work deepens. First, you saw how the habit of checking isn't about urgency, it's about emotional relief. You interrupted that loop with one simple sentence and a timer, proving that nothing collapses when you delay. Then you separated discomfort from emergency, learning that the urge to check usually signals cognitive friction, not real necessity. Next, you dismantled the myth that constant availability equals professionalism, and you replaced it with structured visibility, predictable check windows that reset expectations. Finally, you walked through a real afternoon where the urge spiked, pressure increased, and the old reflex almost took over, but structure held, and depth followed. The goal was never perfection. It was containment. Now here are exactly 3 steps you can implement today. Step 1. Choose 2 check windows for tomorrow morning and write them down physically. For example, 10:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. Until those times, inboxes stay fully closed, not minimized. Closed. If you break the rule, restart the window. This builds consistency. Step 2. Use the microscript the moment the urge appears. Quietly say, checking is scheduled, not emotional, or discomfort means stay. Pair it with one slow breath, inhale 4, exhale 6. This interrupts the reflex before it turns into a click. Step 3. Create escalation clarity. Decide which channel truly represents urgency. Maybe that's a direct phone call or a specific subject line. Everything else waits for the window. This removes the vague anxiety that something catastrophic might be hiding behind a badge count. That's it. 2 windows. 1 script. 1 escalation rule. You don't need 10 systems. You need rhythm. As this becomes consistent, something subtle shifts. Your brain stops scanning. The constant low-level vigilance begins to quiet. You feel less pulled by phantom pings. When you sit down to work, your mind transitions faster because it's no longer conditioned to expect interruption every few minutes. And here's the deeper benefit: your sense of self-respect increases. Not because you ignored people, but because you managed your attention deliberately. There's a quiet confidence that comes from not being instantly reachable. It signals to others that your time has structure. More importantly, it signals to you that your focus has value. If you want to go deeper into this, the next logical layer is learning how to recover when focus breaks anyway, because sometimes it will. Notifications slip through. You click once. Momentum drops. The next lesson to watch would be focus, getting back on track after you break focus. That builds the restart muscle, so even when discipline falters, you reset quickly instead of spiraling into distraction. Because that's the real skill, not perfection, but recovery. Constant checking trains your brain to anticipate. Structured checking trains it to concentrate. Over time, anticipation feels noisy. Concentration feels calm. And calm is power. If you want to keep strengthening that calm control over your attention, subscribe and build this discipline one lesson at a time.